Excellent. Well, welcome everybody that's joined so far. This is the launch of New Gen Accountant's first Quarantine Talks Instagram live series. So expect to see a lot more of this going forward from now. We have a special guest, as you can see, Alan, and I'll let Alan give a sort of brief introduction of himself and what he does.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. I'm Alan Jaglinzer. I'm the professor of financial accounting and the head of the accounting faculty subject group at the University of Cambridge. And I'm here, I guess, to talk about CFO paths and in particular our program as well.
Great. Fantastic. So thank you for the introduction, Alan. So I guess today's session, as Alan mentioned, is really going to be about CFOs. And, you know, in our network, we have a lot of people who are working in either practice as, let's say, auditors, or working in business in finance teams. And many of our members are really sort of aspiring to get to that CFO position. But sometimes it's not always clear how to get there or what the best route is or what the different options that are available are. So I guess my first question to you, if we sort of kick straight into it, is, you know, what do people need to be thinking about? What sort of skills do they need? And what does that pathway look like to actually becoming a CFO?
So I guess the first thing I want to do is color that there is no such thing as a CFO path. Mm-hmm. And the term CFO is sort of a bundled term. And I hear it a lot with former students who are talking about, I want to be an entrepreneur. And it's almost too vague, right? So a lot of it depends on in what. And so a lot of what we try to do is we unpack sort of what's the core mission that you're trying to accomplish and what specific skills do you need for the need of that enterprise. And so a lot of it is need-based around the enterprise. And I'm going to step back and do a little bit of background because a lot of the learning and a lot of the introduction of what we've developed in our project is related to the background that I come from. Surprisingly, some of my learning or some of my teaching comes from my experience as an Air Force pilot in the United States Air Force. So we did a lot of combat flight planning, risk assessment. Part of the CFO element is risk and dealing with risk, and you can see what we're dealing with right now and how to handle risk. I also taught for 6 years in the MBA program at Stanford and dealt with a lot of students who are entrepreneurs, who are chief financial officers. In fact, some of them are helping to advise what we're doing. I also spent 7 years at the University of Colorado and trained a lot of people into accounting, finance roles, consulting, private equity, banks, et cetera. And one of the things I realized that what we do a really good job of is train on sort of fundamentals of knowledge and skills, but we don't really train them on judgment and leadership and the nuances behind the roles and also understanding how to market ourselves. And so a lot of this is marketing. When I get into the specifics of the CFO itself, some of it is also recognizing kind of how to market what your skills are and how to market on behalf of the enterprise you're dealing with. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I was an academic fellow at the International Accounting Standards Board, and I've spent 3 years building a global leadership program with Dr. Mike Willis, who's in the chat as well. So he's going to help answer some comments on the program itself. And the idea was to basically try to help with these types of questions because my experience has been that we have too much focus on technical training. And we do a very good job of technical training, but we don't talk about the nuanced stuff. And we don't talk about, how does one deal with COVID and the mass interest, even how do you predict it? How do you maneuver around it? Right now, CFOs are dealing with everything from where do we get funding? Do we close down business lines? Do we pivot into completely different business operations? And so a lot of that is not really taught in a classroom environment, and we're bringing that into a classroom environment. With respect to the CFO, I want to come back to that main point. There is no such thing as a CFO. There is no one fit on CFO. A lot of it is driven by the mission of the enterprise that you're interested in working with. And so whenever I work with students, I'm like, what's the core purpose that you're trying to accomplish? And then what are the needs that that institution needs? And also one of the things that people need to understand is that the CFO role changes through the life cycle of enterprises as well. And so I'll give you some stories about some of my former students who were the right person at the right time for the enterprise, but then they left because they had specific skills that the enterprise needed at that time. And you can see that like in a startup, you have different skill sets than you might if you're going to go into a merger, or even if you're going to deal with what you're dealing with now, which might be bankruptcy. So the best advice is first sort of know what purpose you're after. And actually, I'm going to talk a lot about that in next week's talk with Success Talks, which is sort of networking with purpose and understanding kind of what you're trying to get to. And then also study the institution and its core needs, and then map that into your specific skill set, and then train up on the gaps in your skills. So some might need some M&A training, and some might need training in specific scientific technology, and some might need the ability to kind of work with VCs and networks with venture capital, and so alignment with the mission is critical. Passionate understanding of the mission of the enterprise is critical. And then identifying the core need analysis. And then the next piece is networking into the cohorts where they can actually earn trust with you on how to understand how you fit into their project and how you can grow into the project. And sometimes also we can use LinkedIn, which is to me one of the most powerful tools for any kind of project. Where we can take a look at some of our CFO people, and we can kind of reverse engineer the path that they've chosen. To be clear, that doesn't mean that's the right path for us, but it gives some sense of a roadmap, and you can even triangulate from the data to understand sort of how did they get there, what training did they use, and then you may even be able to get an opportunity to speak with them and find out what they didn't get and how they filled those gaps as well. We have to talk about sort of the core needs for CFO, and a lot of it is fundamental to the audience here, right? So you need finance and you need accounting, and data analytics are almost certain. You have to know how to do that. And so technical training in that is key. Being able to articulate that you have the technical skills is key. That might come from a chartered certificate or something like that. Passing exams and obviously experience is key. But the things that you also need to do, because we tend to over focus on, do you understand the financial reporting stuff, or do you understand kind of how to do the math, or is all the other stuff that the CFO is responsible for now, including HR, people management, negotiations. I mean, you're negotiating deals with investors, you're negotiating M&A deals. Environmental impact is now a huge issue that CFOs have to think about, because investors are demanding more disclosure on environmental impact, and then also the money is flowing or not flowing based on the perception of environmental impact, and then other sustainability issues. So there's a whole lot of breadth of learning that CFOs have to know now beyond the technical skills, and a lot of the stuff that isn't taught in the classroom in the typical training programs, or even on the job in many cases, is the stuff around people. And so we've brought a lot of that learning in, because a lot of it is management of people, management of perception about you, building trust, genuine trust, and how people can understand who you are. One of the core elements is also the ability to be agile, to be creative, to pivot. Like right now is a classic example of where companies have to have the entire leadership team on pivot mode, right? It's incredibly dire for some companies. And so they have to be super creative about generating new lines, shutting down lines, finding new sources of capital, allocating to efficient, production or whatever. And so being agile, being able to pivot very quickly into something else and identify how to do that fast is really key, I think, as well. So it's almost like an entrepreneurial element. And I think the more successful CFOs are the ones who can think entrepreneur and with that mindset or experience. For example, if you're a public US company, you're dealing with regulatory scrutiny, you're dealing with litigation, right? And so people who have experience with doing quarterly calls and dealing with analysts and dealing with a lot of scrutiny or whatever, who don't mind the litigation environment around it, people like that might actually be somebody who can step in. And then, as I mentioned before, there might be M&A opportunities where you're the one who understands how to do the deal best or something. And so thinking in terms of sort of, here's my sweet area of expertise and here's how I'm going to spot into that. So the idea of being like the CFO, again, it comes down to sort of a niche thing and a marketing thing, and saying, this is my area of where I'm going to plug in. And here's, maybe the CFO is to help with sort of transition into environmental stuff, or transition into an M&A or something like that. So for me, we just need a bigger platform to help kind of people understand that all these skills have to be trained, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you made some really, really good points. And something that's really key is, so I was reading an article the other day, and what it said is that, a CFO is really a business leader who just happens to have some skills in finance. But the ultimate thing is that they are a leader, and they can manage people, as you said. They do have all these soft skills, and they are agile and able to manage, teams in a crisis. So how do people sort of go around, like, specifically understanding where they lack certain soft skills and then like building on those soft skills? Because I know you mentioned that typical training programs, such as, maybe like ACA or ACCA, or maybe some of these other qualifications, are great for getting the technical knowledge. But how do people take that step further to get those soft skills? And then also you mentioned that, LinkedIn is a great tool, and I can definitely sort of agree with that. I use LinkedIn so much, not only just to post, but as you said, I look through people's profiles. I'll look at a CFO. What did they do to get there? What qualifications do they have? What has their journey been like? And I do that quite a lot. So how do you think sort of mentorship plays into this? Like, how important is it to have a mentor as well?
So two questions. One is on the interpersonal skills piece, or the understanding. First of all, one has to want to understand.
Yeah.
And a lot of us don't. A lot of us just don't want to recognize sort of what we're lacking and how we interrelate with people. And so one of the things we've introduced is an interpersonal dynamics course, which helps really, really colorfully illustrate some of what we bring to the table in group dynamics. And that's been borrowed and modified from Stanford MBA, and also human interaction laboratories that have been running around. And that is a phenomenal experience from my personal experience, both being on the recipient side and also helping facilitate in that. The other thing is, if you're sensitive and you understand sort of if you're paying attention to sort of the work dynamics, and you kind of get agitated by certain dynamics, but you can sense when teams are working. If you take notes, that helps. With respect to the mentors, so one of the things that I will talk about, and we don't have a lot of time here in this particular format, but I actually built the talk for next week. So this is a plug for Dennis's success talks next week. But it talks about purposeful networking, and this relates to the mentorship, the question. The key is developing genuine trust with somebody and understanding that they are willing to invest time in you. So the one thing that is extremely important is that we're all unbelievably busy, and people in these roles are even more so, and people are constantly asking of them. So for them to invest time in you means that they trust you, and they see some potential in you. So how does one develop that trust? The one thing to be careful about is you can do that very successfully if you share the emotional attachment to the mission, because then their mentorship matters. One of the dangers I see is often we look for mentorship in organizations to which we don't belong. And so we're getting mentorship on how to succeed in an institution that I really don't feel an attachment to. And so success there is not necessarily proper for us. And so sometimes we need to triangulate and find mentors outside of our group or outside of our institution. So stated another way, just asking some CFO to mentor you isn't necessarily the right thing to do. Finding somebody who is in the space that you care about and who cares as much as you do about the proper project is somebody who can actually be super valuable.
Okay, interesting. No, that's really useful to hear. And then I guess, so talking more specifically then about the Cambridge Judge School Masters of Accounting program, how does that help in terms of sort of building out your network, maybe possibly accessing mentors? And also, if someone was to do that program, at what stage in their career would it make most sense? Would it be, when they're newly qualified, or maybe a bit later?
So we tend to work with people who are experienced, and we just leave that more general. We have a range of experience within, so we don't have any specific restrictions per se, but we have a range of experience from 2 to 10 years out, typically. People who are hungry for leadership roles, and it's very much a leadership and policy-oriented program. I mean, we do some technical work, but all of our technical work relates to policy. What are the implications? How do we change everything? Our entire profession is undergoing massive amounts of change dynamic, not only because of COVID, but audit. We mentioned environmental reporting, and all that. So everything is policy oriented. So we're looking for people who are hungry, who like change projects, and a lot of what we're building is change curriculum and change management and negotiations and things of that nature. With respect to the kind of candidate the time out is less important than the hunger and the purpose. So the one thing that I'll talk about very briefly, which I will talk more about in that talk next week, is I will not waste people's time. I hate wasting people's time. That's one way that where I can earn trust from somebody. They know that if they come to me, I promise to invest in them because I will not waste their time. I hate when people waste my time. So the idea here is that we're looking for people who want to bridge into these types of roles, who want to actually affect change, who want to build on infrastructure, who want to go into public policy from this, or who want to be the leaders of the transitions within accounting, finance, who want to be leadership roles. I say enterprises purposely because oftentimes we talk about chief financial officers of corporation X or startup Y, but we could be talking about non-profit organizations, for-purpose organizations, United Nations. We could be talking about World Bank. It could be any of these institutions, right? Education policy. I put a student there as well. So that's the kind of person who we're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely does. And I guess leading on from that then, so you mentioned that there's a lot of change going on in the accountancy profession right now. A lot of that has to do with technology as well. So how does that play into things? Because if you're somebody who's newly qualified at the moment and you know in the future, at some point in the future, you want to sort of work your way up and maybe get to a CFO position, you know, it's probably going to look a lot different to how it does now in terms of technology. So what's your thoughts on that, and how does the program fit into that as well?
So we do the data analytics stuff and all the new technology with respect to that. A lot of it's predictive out, but one of the core elements is our program is designed around literally global leading advisors. Mm-hmm. So our advisors with us are predicting forward where we're heading. And they bring in, and we bring in, so one of the core elements of the program is we literally bring the world's leaders to the table, literally, and often it's to the dinner table if we're not in a COVID environment. And so we sit down and they'll share with us their ideas on where we're heading, and then they'll ask our students sort of, what do you think, where should we be going? So a lot of the discussion is us trying to forecast ahead as a group because nobody knows where we're heading. And so we can do that with respect to AI, we can do that with respect to blockchain. We've had discussions on blockchain. I'll give you some examples. Alexi Wellman, we just had her. She's the CFO of Altaba, which is an offshoot of the Yahoo Verizon merger. She is now an advisor for us. She was the controller at Yahoo during their data breach. And so she is now advising us on things such as data and data security. Steve Voskuil, who's the CFO of Hershey. We've got I mentioned Natalie Fair, Rob Lawson, who's the head of global mergers and acquisitions at BP. He is leading BP's environmental initiatives. And so he comes in and talks about change and change initiatives, and particularly in an oil and gas company heading towards environmental with all the stuff. So a lot of the technological stuff comes in through our experts. And one of the core elements of this particular program is we want our students to dictate some of the curriculum as well. So the students come in and say, hey, I want to learn more about X. And we build a conference around that as well, where the students determine as a cohort, what do they want to learn? And we bring in, you know, one of the benefits of Cambridge is we can bring in anybody, assuming there's no COVID, and we'll assemble sort of a who's who on the topic, and the students will interact with them and they'll do a lot of prep on it. So we're all learning together and legitimately from the world's leaders in these topics. We have the head of audit innovation, KPMG, New York. We have the head of audit assurance market innovation lead partner Ben Taylor in London, EY, and they all come to the table with their ideas. We have the CEO of the ICAW coming in talking about audit change and audit policy. So a lot of the technology, so let me step back. A lot of the technology is done in our courses with respect to some of the data and the data processing that we're doing, but a lot of it is also built out based on real world cases as we approach problems and as students identify that this is an area that we want to explore. And we build cases in real time for them.
Wow, that's amazing to have that experience with the cases and sort of people who are working in these positions coming in and offering their perspective. So how important would you say it is for people to pursue further study after qualifying if they want to kind of get into these leadership roles?
So it depends. So some people will pursue further study for kind of a brand. I'm not into that. I want content. And so for me, it's all about, again, everything I do is purpose oriented. Like, what's the purpose and where's the best training? I like to go to the most efficient route for the training. And so in some cases, and I'll actually, again, I hate to defer to next week, But I'll talk about what I call ground zero learning next week, where you go to the site, it might be a month immersion, and you can learn an incredible amount in a month going into a particular location and studying at the source. And I'll discuss that in the context of the networking thing next week. But in this, you know, there is no sort of, so when I work with students and they come to me, I'm like, okay, where are you trying to go? Which program fits you? Why? And a lot of the why is the who more than the program itself. It's sort of who's running the program. This actually brings me back to the mentorship concept that you asked before. For me, it's all about, okay, where are you trying to go and who's doing it and how do you get access to that person and how do we get you face to face with them? And one of the levers we get to pull is we've got, you know, 14th century buildings, and we can pull people into University of Cambridge, again, assuming we have travel restrictions lifted and it's safe. And so I call up people, I say, would you like to come to Cambridge and discuss this with our students? And I almost never hear no. And so that allows us to have, but again, it comes back to trust because they know that we're actually very serious about learning and trying to elevate the dialogue. And so they're very interested. Our advisory board fully believes that what we're doing is important because this type of training doesn't exist right now for our field. And so it's an opportunity to kind of gap fill in that space.
That's excellent. So it sounds, yeah, like very, very valuable training for people who do want to get into those leadership roles. So a lot of the people I speak to, particularly in our New Gen Accountants network, they are really interested in pursuing, you know, further training. They do want to become, you know, tomorrow's leaders. But one thing that they're concerned about is the funding and financing it. So just be interested to hear your perspective on how that works on the program.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of our program is that we're in residence, but we meet 4 times a year for a week in a normal cycle. Obviously, with COVID, we're modified it slightly for the moment, but we do plan to meet in person. At least for the moment, we're planning to meet in September when we restart for the new cycle. But this allows most of our students continue to work. And so that allows them to have financial support, at least from that perspective. And in some cases, what we've been able to do is coordinate with their senior leaders to articulate the value of the program. We've even brought in some of their senior leaders as sort of subject. So one of the options is we can get some of their senior leadership in to come work with us on cases that they're wrestling with. And so the idea is that the students can bring content back in real time. And we've actually gotten some corporate sponsorships of students through that mechanism. We do have some bursaries that we have within the Judge Business School and the colleges. So Cambridge has 31 colleges and every student's assigned to a college. They also have funding. And then one of the other things that I insist on, and I know some of my former students are in this chat, is I tell our students that this is an equity stake and they own part of this program. And the anticipated goal is that they'll help crowdfund for future students because we're all going to learn collectively. And the value of the institution. So all of our alumni come back. We expect the alumni to be part of all this learning because if we place them in the leadership roles, then they're learning and they're bringing curriculum back and they're bringing networks back. And so the idea is that hopefully some of them will become financially stable enough. Of course, in this environment, it's difficult, but they can help also crowdfund some of the resources for students. The other thing to consider too is, and this is something that we have to work on because of our longevity. We don't have the data yet, but the idea of, you know, the value add in a financial, I mean, I can talk about the value add in sort of a conceptual, emotional learning space. But with respect to putting, you know, pound signs on front of, hey, your salary went up by X, you know, that data we don't have yet because we haven't been around long enough to do that data at this point. And of course, we're in a COVID environment, so who knows what salaries look like going into this environment. But we try to work really hard with students on that.
Great, fantastic. So thank you for that. So just in the interest of time, I think we've had a few questions come through. So I'm just going to have a quick look at those. So the questions are, so in terms of the program, so I know you mentioned that people usually work and do the program at the same time. But do you have occasions where people do sort of shift maybe to a new employer after doing the program? Or
yeah, we've had several. Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that we do is so our program is small by design. So we're targeting, you know, right now we're looking 30-ish of students because we create a community.
Yeah.
And we invest deeply in our students. And so students come to us, we do one-to-one mentorship with respect to career placements. And so if they want to do career shifts, we discuss how to do that. We try to bridge into the appropriate networks and do that matching. And so I almost forgot the question. Did I answer? I don't think I answered the question, but I kind of forgot where we were going. What was the question again?
The question was, do people change employers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some do, and we want to help that change. So I have one student who's very interested in public policy, and so we're working with him on cases around NHS and trying to build NHS data cases and stuff like that, so we can move into policy type work. So yeah, that happens, and we're ready to accommodate that.
Excellent. So sounds like a really great program. Sounds like, if people are working and they're accountants and they're working in finance, this is a really great program to really build on those soft skills and develop what you need to become tomorrow's leader, and also think about the future of the accountancy profession, how it's changing, and learn everything you need to learn to sort of get to that position. So I guess my sort of final question is, if people want to find out more, how do they sort of do that? How can they get in contact with you as well?
So it's a very personalized program, and we really want to know everybody who's interested in what. I come back to this comment of I absolutely refuse to waste people's time and money in our program. And so what we recommend is, on our website, we have a link to send in a CV, and that allows us. So Dr. Mike Willis is on board here. He communicates with everybody who does that, and so he gets an opportunity to talk. And we also have taster days. When we can go live in person, we invite people up to come visit, and they sit in the classroom, they see what we're doing, they understand that we're, by the way, we are very technical in some of our training, but it's a very different kind of technical. So we talk about policy and everything we do. And so they come in and they are part of the class. They don't sit in the back and watch. Like, if you're in my classroom, you're in my classroom and you're immersed in the case. And then they go to lunch or dinner with our students and they get to know them. I will say that we literally have students from around the world: Lagos, Sydney, Rio, Washington, D.C., New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, Luxembourg, Beijing, Bangalore, Riyadh, Dubai. Like, it is a global program by design, and it's organically built that way. And so you get an opportunity to mingle with these people from everywhere and build networks globally.
Great, fantastic. So yeah, people can get a free sort of CV review, come to taster days. So that's a really good opportunity for people to test out whether that's something that.
Yeah, and when we're in normal mode, we do, we'll do coffees in London and stuff like that. Like, I can't wait to hop the train again. But hey, I guess right now we're doing this. So,
yeah.
So we'll hop on Skype, we'll hop on whatever and chat with people, because we really, it's a community is what we're building.
Great, fantastic. And just out of interest, just before we wrap up,
sure.
You said that you used to teach and be a professor in the US at Stanford. So how does that differ, sort of being in the US to now being in the UK at Cambridge? Just what's that kind of like?
In some ways, they're comparable in the sense of the kind of student that they collect, and the fact that they're truly global. So one of the things that struck me most about both institutions is they are absolutely global impact institutions. Everybody who comes is a global citizen, and the kind of students we interact with are intellectually curious. I mean, they really want to learn. They're thinking about big problems. They internalize all of it, and it's not just, hey, I want to work in this region and I just want to make a paycheck. And so if this is all about making more money or making a paycheck, with very little impact, then it's not really that exciting. But so that's the common thing, I think, across the two schools. So it's nice where you walk around a community and you hear every language and you see everything. And now that to me is the common thread with the both. But we have the cooler buildings by far at Cambridge. Gothic 14th century architecture. You can't top it there.
Amazing. Sounds great. So, I need to come along to one of these.
You definitely do need to come.
Definitely.
For real.
Okay, great. Well, we're at 8:30 now. So thank you so much for your time. That's been an
Cool.
invaluable discussion. I know I've already seen some comments come through, people saying how useful they found this. So definitely, if anybody is interested in sort of hearing more about the program and are really thinking about this CFO route, then really sort of, engage with the website, look at the CV reviews, look at the taster days, reach out to Alan if you want to go for a coffee, and sort of, go on from there.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, we take it very seriously that we're building content for CFO prep, and so this is why we have 2 Fortune 500 CFOs who are very, very, very seriously interested in helping us build curriculum. And I think it's incredibly important that they're willing to do that with us because they understand how difficult it is to get their heads around that job. And they really want to share their learning. I mean, you could see, even though she couldn't fly over, you could see the amount of warmth that Alexi was trying to give our students because she really cares about her role. At least that was my feel for that. So I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity. Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah.
And we're happy to answer questions, and Dr. Willis is happy to answer questions. And we're also happy to get our current students involved to answer questions as well. So if you want questions, they're happy to talk with you as well.
Great, fantastic.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
I'll post the details for yourself and Dr. Willis with the people who joined. So great.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.